It used to be, college is a place for open dialogue and open debate. But we find free speech zones, we find unconstitutional speech policies, and that's our goal with this campaign. Our National Fight for Free Speech campaign is how do we tackle them and how do we change them and reform them.
Hi, I'm Nick Gillespie with Reason TV. Today we're talking with Cliff Maloney Jr. He's the Executive Director for Young Americans for Liberty. Cliff, thanks for talking to us.
Nick, pleasure to be with you.
Young Americans for Liberty, YAL for short, is an outgrowth of Ron Paul's presidential campaigns. You try to get younger Americans for liberty, to become libertarian and to start thinking about that stuff. What are the big things that you're working on these days?
Sure. So as you know, we started back in 2008, 2009 out of Ron Paul's campaign. Started about 100 chapters, and today I'm happy to say we're over 750 chapters on college campuses nationwide. The two major things we're focusing on, first being our fall recruitment drive, our broad stroke effort to reach as many college kids as we possibly can with these ideas and principles of liberty.
So what does that mean? What kind of activities do you do on campus,
Sure.
and where are the hot spots where students are like, holy cow, this where you've been all my life, this
Sure.
sounds great.
So we try to make politics sexy. It's the best way to say it, right? We try to reach kids on these campuses.
I think I just threw up a little bit in my mouth, but yeah.
We try to reach kids with these ideas, and we do that through activism, right? So real events, what college campuses are supposed to be all about, taking ideas to students and having these discussions. And so we package this. We've got 16 different activism events that we offer to our student chapters. For example, something like Visualize the Debt, where they'll build out, right now we're about to hit 20 trillion, right? So maybe we have 19 trillion, those numbers across the campus quad, and they're starting discussions with students. And well, what is this 190? What are all these zeros? And they start to have questions about what is the debt, and we talk about it. Other things we've done is an event called Incarceration Nation, where we're really calling out, this idea that we should have mandatory minimums and just saying we need criminal justice reform, right? So we try to find different ideas or different events to bring people in, introduce them to our ideas, and expand our reach on college campuses.
What are the issues that students respond to? What's at the top of their, oh my God, this is an outrage list?
Right. So usually current events, anytime we can tie them in, we connect much better. So another major push we have right now is something called YAL's Fight for Free Speech campaign. And that is an effort due to all of these recent outrages over what is allowed to be said on campus, this PC culture. And what we're doing is we are literally going after what these campuses call free speech zones. So for those that haven't heard of this, free speech zone is an area, let's say a 20 feet by 20 feet zone, that a school says, they're allowed to speak freely in that zone. This is America, right? We have the First Amendment. And so what we're doing is we're targeting these free speech zones on campuses. These are public universities, right?
So they're bound by constitutional, rules about First Amendment speech.
Correct. Taxpayer-funded public universities. And what we do is we do a specific activism event that deals with free speech. Let me give an example. So we'll do a YAL free speech ball event. And what this is a huge beach ball that will blow up. Let's say 6 feet, by 6 feet ball. And these student leaders will blow them up, and they'll roll them around, and they'll just ask students, hey, come exercise your right to free speech, use this Sharpie, and share your expression. And we've had incidents where campuses will have college bureaucrats or security guards from campus come out and tell these students we need a permit, or you're not allowed to do that.
And I take it you're filming that, you're tweeting it, you're Facebooking it.
Right, and the other component of this is to share it as much as we can through media, to really call out, this facade that is free speech on these campuses.
What are some of the worst campuses that you guys encountered for free speech?
We had an incident at University of Delaware last semester where we had a student handing out pocket constitutions, and he was stopped, from campus security.
So it's a dangerous document.
I mean, I guess, just handing out pocket constitutions. He was stopped, saying he needs a permit to do so. Right? Fairmont University just last week in West Virginia had an incident where students were out talking about free speech, getting students to sign up, getting them interested in Young Americans for Liberty, and the school administrator said that they were being too outgoing with their recruitment, right? They need a permit or they need some sort of permission to be out talking to people. And so I think that all of these cases are just flipping it on its head. It used to be, college is a place for open dialogue and open debate. but we find free speech zones, we find unconstitutional speech policies, and that's our goal with this campaign. Our National Fight for Free Speech campaign is how do we tackle them and how do we change them and reform them.
Who are the students you're attracting? Is there a kind of common set of characteristics about them? Is one part of the country, kind of more interested than the other? What can you give a kind of sense of that?
Let me bring up the current election, right? For all that it's worth, I came back. I just got back to Young Americans for Liberty, and I didn't know what to expect. There's all this going on. And what we're finding is that students are that much more engaged because you have individuals. This isn't a Kerry and a Bush or a Gore and a Bush race, right? This is a Trump. When you look at the two major candidates, everybody knows who they are, but they're not.
So wait, you mean Gary Johnson and Jill Stein?
Correct, okay. Correct, of course.
But between Trump and Hillary, these are oversized mannequins.
Right, but nobody's, nobody on these campuses are excited.
Right.
And what we're finding is that's an opening for Young Americans for Liberty. It's an opening for us to present real solutions, real policy, because what we get right now is all celebrity. It's all personality. Nobody's talking about issues. And so when you see a student on campus who's doing activism, who's doing fun projects to present our ideas of liberty, it's engaging. You're like, this is actually something that matters, a solution.
Is this a particularly responsive moment that you're finding on campuses or among young people for libertarianism?
I think that the ideas that we're presenting, we've never seen such an interest from folks. And I think that's where it's our responsibility to step in and fill this vacuum. And so I think the more that we do that, the more that we take this opportunity, this is a time to double down, right? You've got to have somebody step in. And the other thing is, it's time to lead and not react, right? We need to lead with that positive narrative of liberty. If you present these principles, that we all hold dear, right? Sober foreign policy, real privacy, right? I mean, things that, with this new Snowden movie should make a very clear case for everybody out there. Limited government in a broad sense, how debt is killing people. We have college students who are making minimum wage. They're working 20-hour weeks, right? And they're losing 30% of what they make to the government.
Talk a bit about, it seems to me that Hillary, or certainly Bernie Sanders, like Ron Paul, had a pretty good following, a pretty strong following among young people and on college campuses. What's interesting is that Bernie Sanders got there by saying, I'm going to give you free health care, I'm going to give you free college, I'm going to give you, free parking, whatever. Ron Paul got there through a very different set of policy concerns. Is the libertarian message of saying, let's make government smaller and more efficient in the places it needs to be, but let's shrink it, is that enough to woo younger people who oftentimes seem to be like, oh, I'm $25,000 in debt, I'm $30,000 in debt, and this old guy from Vermont, not from Texas, is saying he'll cover my bills. Can libertarianism compete with that?
Yeah, I think we have to. It's our responsibility to do that. And one of the sayings I love is freedom, not free stuff. But I think that, as you look at why were people attracted to Bernie, sure, I think, the broad strokes of, hey, he's honest, right? And he's somebody who's anti-establishment, and he's, gonna be honest with people and just truthful. I think that was what was more appealing. And then you got to some of these socialist policies and you realize, well, hey guys, economics teaches us that this can't happen. And once again, it's another reason that liberty-minded, limited government individuals, we have to step forward, we have to educate people. And this is the battle we face on campus is, are people going to be in the Young Americans for Liberty crowd? Are you going to be somebody who thinks that individual liberty, not government, can create solutions? Or are you going to continue to turn to the government? And I think the more that people do that, the more that we see people coming our way.
That's great to hear. And talk a little bit about, you got activated into politics by Ron Paul, his presidential campaign in 2008. Talk a little bit about what was his appeal to you, and how did it make you kind of think different than the world in which you were raised?
Sure. I come from a family of a blue-collar Democrat and a Christian conservative mother, but I think that I found Ron Paul, and it really opened my eyes to a different way, right? A way that made sense. And obviously later on realizing it was this liberty-minded libertarian path that said social tolerance, but at the same time, limiting government and finding ways that we can get economics in order. And what I realized was, especially the foreign policy end of it, right? He was actually talking about, why do people dislike the United States, right? And understanding what a sober foreign policy looks like. And you see people right now, people like Rand Paul, who's still leading the crusade to say, maybe we shouldn't be giving out billions and billions of dollars in foreign aid to individuals. We need a sane voice, and I think that the Republican Party, and honestly just liberty-minded people in any way, right? Any way that we can push these ideas forward, I think that it's about finding every vehicle that we can find, and I'd love to have more college students come over to Young Americans for Liberty and start to share that message with us.
All right, well, we will leave it there. We have been talking with Cliff Maloney Jr. He's the Executive Director of Young Americans for Liberty. Thanks so much, Cliff.
Thanks, Nick.
For Reason TV, I'm Nick Gillespie.